Morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Tina-Desiree Berg. I am reporting for Status Coup here at Moss Landing, which is in the Monterey Bay area of California. If you don't know where Monterey is, it's Central Coast, almost Northern California area. We are very close to Salinas, which is a big farm area. That's where a lot of the lettuce, artichokes, broccoli, all kinds of vegetables are grown, not only for California, but for big chunks of the United States. Right behind me, you will see what looks like a nuclear power plant facility. What it actually is a lithium battery storage facility. It caught on fire earlier this week. All the batteries pretty much burnt. I think there was about 100,000 batteries in that facility. 80% burned. Yeah. All right, so 80% burned. Interesting factoid about lithium is that it ignites when it reacts to water. So if it gets wet, it will catch on fire. So this becomes very problematic if you are trying to obviously put out a fire. You can't use water. So now the concern is that there are toxins not only in the air, but possibly the water, definitely in the soil. We've had some reporting back on the soil this week. So I'm here reporting on what's going on. I have two locals that have been on the forefront of trying to get information out to the public on this. There's been not a lot of transparency, unfortunately. We have the company Vistra, who actually even created a false website to try to sort of distract from what's going on here. That was original reporting, I think, from Hollenbrook that reported that this week. Anyway, so this is Brian, this is Matthew. We're going to be talking with them today. They're going to walk us through some of the chain of events of how we got here, what's going on currently, and just the state of affairs. But a lot of people are becoming very ill, and that's obviously a point of contention. So Brian, first with you, can you walk us through the timeline of how this happened and where we are now?
Yes. So my name is Brian Roeder. I grew up in the Santa Cruz area. I now live in Prunedale, which is about 8 miles east of the plant. I returned to the area about 2 years ago after about a 27-year absence. I have a background in small business, board management, not-for-profits. Thursday the 16th, I think it was, we saw reports at our house. My wife and were with our 7-year-old son. We saw reports showing that this power plant had caught on fire. For years, since the 50s, it was an oil-fired power plant that was shut down sometime in the late 90s or the early aughts when I was not living here. There are all these power lines emanating from this location right here on the side of the bay that then go out all across the state. So apparently a decision was made in the mid-teens to put in solar battery backup capabilities for all of the solar that's going into California as a way to store that energy and then distribute it at night. Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So on Thursday evening, we saw reports. We went out on our back balcony. We saw the fire from our home. And on Friday morning, we knew that the wind was going to shift towards us away from Watsonville to our north. And we were fortunate. We had the ability, and so we decided we were going to leave. We went to San Francisco. On Saturday morning, my wife started a Facebook group, and by the end of the day, there were 1,000 people on it. By the end of Sunday, there were 2,000 people on it. One of those people, a woman named Tanya Rivera, reached out and said that she wanted to get people together at the Prunedale Grange to try and have people talk about what's happening. I have a background, among other things, in facilitation, so I offered to facilitate that meeting. We had about 200 people in attendance in the hall. Several hundred more were online. We, in that meeting, attempted to shift people immediately towards looking at what had happened and trying to understand it and get organized so that our community could immediately start to take action in the face of what we assumed was going to be a certain amount of disinformation by the corporation, which has $1 billion investment here. And we, at that time, didn't know the role that authorities would be able to play in helping our community. In the week that followed, a lot of people reached out to us, and the two local Facebook group sites continue to grow, and to see people sharing their experiences and at my wife's site in particular, their health situation. There were reports all across the Bay Area here, ranging from marina and seaside in the south, all the way up to Santa Cruz and beyond, into the mountains above Santa Cruz, of people with breathing problems, eye irritation, nose irritation, skin irritation, abdominal and digestive problems that they hadn't had before. It was spread all over. And the result was that we also realized that we were not hearing a lot from the authorities. Glenn Church, who's the district supervisor for this area, did immediately get up. He was here on site the night of the fire broke out, and it was covered extensively by local media for several days. He said that there was a real problem here. And very quickly, Dawn Addis, who's the assemblywoman for part of this district, coming up towards Carmel, she also came up and immediately got involved in saying that there's a problem here, and this plant has created a huge environmental potential disaster. But that was, by and large, it. Things started kind of going radio silent over the past week and a half otherwise. Some local politicians and some folks who work in Sacramento weighed in, and unless they're doing other things that we're not hearing about, it was kind of a one and done. The EPA showed up immediately. There was a press conference, I think, on Saturday or Sunday, perhaps, maybe Monday at the latest, and a woman from the EPA said that they tested for a chemical. I think it's hexafluorine. Yeah. You guys can confirm if that's it. They said that they'd taken air samples at, I think it was 7 locations around the plant, and they'd found no evidence that it occurred, or that it had been, what they said has been fully destroyed in the fire, and that it had not caused a problem. And then they packed up and left town. But as the reports kept coming out of people having medical issues, it was clear there was something going on in our environment. And additionally, people started weighing in with their understanding, which is far greater than mine, of these chemicals and what they are. As I like to say, there's one gentleman who I call a big brain guy, and he put up something on one of the sites that said that his back of napkin calculations, based upon the chemistry of these batteries and the count of 100,000 batteries that have been provided by the company, was that upwards of 5,000 tons of toxic chemicals had gone into the air. The official line was that the fire had gone up several thousand feet at 5 or 15,000 feet, I think they said, and that smoke had dissipated, causing no fallout or issues for the community. And that was early on. That was within 4 or 5 days of this occurring. And yet these reports of medical conditions continue to come in at our Facebook group. Fast forward, it became pretty clear by the latter part of the first week that testing was not occurring. And if it was being done by the company, they weren't releasing any results. The company had a spokesman here early. He said a few things. He said he was sorry, and then he disappeared. As far as I know, he said he was sorry.
$750 gift card.
They did give, not me. Yeah, other people needed more than I do. I'm fortunate, but they provided $450,000 through a local charitable group. We reached out to confirm there are no strings attached, so they haven't waived any rights. And it's $750 to help people who were displaced. There were 1,200 people that were forced out of their homes for 2 nights.
Right.
But the perception is that, okay, the inconvenience is not what came out of this plant. The inconvenience is people had to leave their homes. So here's $750, and, we're doing the right thing. That's kind of the storyline so far. But all that said, by the end of the week, through us collecting email addresses and through these 2 sites and word of mouth, it became clear. A gentleman reached out to me, an environmental engineer, Michael Pocabla, who owns a firm in Pacific Grove called Biomax Engineering. And Michael reached out through the Facebook group and to me directly, and he said, "Brian, how can I help?" And I responded immediately. I said, Michael, how do we test now that it's weekend for what came out of this plant? And he said, well, we can do swabs for heavy metals. I said, let's do it. So Friday, we assembled 150 test kits. He put together instructions on how to properly use these kits. Saturday, through promoting it just through the various channels, social media primarily, we had 150 people show up at 2 sites, one in Prunedale, 8 miles east of here, and the other one in Capitola, California, in the middle of Santa Cruz area. And they took the kits. We trained them in groups, showed them how to do it. We also made sure that there was paperwork that would be properly filled out for chain of control, which is required for legal action to be able to take based upon the results. Without it, you can't do that. You can get the results, but you can't have that legal capacity. And those results were collected the next day. Those swabs. People came back to those 2 locations. It's where I met Matt, and he'll talk in a bit, I know, for the first time. Matt went out and took like 5 or 6 swabs all over. I mean, it was really something. And we had people do that, but most people just went into their yards. And they took, yes, that's a sample today. That's a different sample. That's water, which he's asked me to try and find someone to analyze. What we did were they were swabs, just like wet swabs, like we'd use to wipe your hands. And you have to do a certain procedure to get residue if it exists. And then they're properly packaged into capsules, and we assembled all of these packages. We collected them last Sunday, not this Sunday, but the Sunday before, just over a week ago. And by Wednesday, we had them all in a database, anonymized, so that the results could be shared, but not in a way that would reveal the location or the names of the people who collected. And this information will be shared with them so they can see what the results were in their yards. And then all was sent off to a testing laboratory, a very credible laboratory in Salt Lake City. And Michael helped make all this happen. You know, I led the effort to get all this out. Michael's the one who gave the expertise. So we're going to have the results of those tests, hopefully by the end of this week. They'll be released not later than, I think, Monday, unless something delays it. They'll go out raw. We'll explain to people that we don't know necessarily what the data means. We'll also try and get it analyzed after it goes out raw, but our hope is that people who know what this data means, right, and there are not existing baselines for this data, but still the numbers may show elevations about anything to be expected. So we'll get that out to everyone that's in our network. And if folks are interested and you want to track what's going on, you can go to the Facebook group. The primary one that we've been working with, that my wife set up, is Moss Landing Power Plant / Vistra, V-I-S-T-R-A, symptoms. And people can go there and see what people have been reporting. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of entries already. So we'll get those results. Now, meanwhile, I think what's critical, Tina, is that there have been, as far as we know, 2 efforts to test. There's a third that we think is underway up in Santa Cruz County, but there have been 2 that have happened that we're aware of. The first was San Jose State University.
Right. Also, can you explain what a baseline is? Because I know they
found one. By baseline, it just means what's normally occurring in the environment. Right. Okay? And we don't know what that is, right? People with bigger brains than us, than me, not necessarily you, Tina, but me, we'll figure that out. My job's different. It's not to be an expert on this stuff. It's to make sure I'm getting people together and trying to communicate and trying to get us coordinated as a community. That's what I do. But there are 2 tests that I'm aware of. The first is was done by San Jose State University, which is part of this amazing facility here with all of these buildings, which is all related to oceanography and to the aquarium, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, the MBARI, Monterey Bay Area Research Institute. That's all here, right here at Moss Landing. Yeah. So the testing that was done done by San Jose State University. They've been going into the Elkhorn Estuary, which we call the slough here, for several years, and they've been testing the soils back in there. The estuary runs into this little harbor here, which is where our fishing fleet is. The estuary is the second largest natural estuary, as far as I know, on the West Coast. It stretches back through the hills here, it goes way back. So they have been doing testing on soils, and I think it was early last week, they announced that they had results of testing they did immediately after the event, and they showed elevated heavy metals up to 1,000 times baseline. They have baseline because they've been testing. Yeah. So right half a mile from here, on the other side of that plant, is where they detected apparently up to 1,000 times increased levels. And
so just to clarify, the EPA didn't test for heavy metals when they were here?
They only tested for the HF and then they left. They said, we've tested, we didn't detect this, and they left. Why the EPA didn't say there are other things that might have come out of this plant, I can't speculate. But they said there's no HF, and HF is apparently very caustic and dangerous. Very small quantities can kill. So I understand why they tested for that. I'm not sure why they didn't test for anything else, and why they said we're done here, right? But anyway, so San Jose State reports came out, and then County of Monterey, under prodding from Glenn Church, our supervisor, had also initiated testing fairly early on. They got the results back this week. The raw data has been released. Again, it can be found online, and people with big brains need to look at it and see if they can determine what it means. But even the county test was at 8 sites that are all within about 3 miles or less of here. So that's the testing we're aware of. We don't know what the company's done. They're not talking. Our test, however, which was carried out by people testing in their yards primarily, stretches all the way about 40 miles north of here and down to Carmel, about 20 miles south of here. 125 swabs were taken and sent in for testing, and it reaches to about 35 miles east of here to Hollister. This is the only test done by citizens, done by us, our group, working with citizens, that will give results of whether or not this cloud carried toxins. Now, if the results are negative, that's great. We assume there's going to be something because what people are saying about their experience. But if it's neutral, it's neutral. The other thing is there are lots of tests that could be done. People are saying, what about arsenic, or what about, asbestos from the plant? The first cut is the metals. If they're present in the environment, that means the other things are too. Okay. So that's why we're testing. Plus, it's, I paid for this myself. Thousands of dollars just for this test, tens of thousands for any other test. So we started with the one that is like the canary in the coal mine, the heavy metals. There are 4: lithium, cobalt, nickel, and manganese. Which are they're all naturally occurring in large quantities. They're all naturally occurring in the environment, right? They're in our bodies. That's fine. But in very high concentrations, they're problematic in a variety of ways that I don't even had time to figure out. Right. So, but this test that is now spread all throughout the region will tell us whether or not this fire's plume created a toxic fallout. And we will know those results hopefully this week, and they will be released to everyone. Yep. And then they'll be analyzed, and we'll get a better picture. So it's a different effort. I mean, I just to kind of summarize, now that you've got, do you have any questions about that TikTok?
So a couple of things. I wanted to mention, you brought up Supervisor Church. Yes. Jordan had interviewed him earlier on the week, and he had described this as sort of a mini 3 Mile Island level of, so it sounds like there is definitely toxins out there. If there weren't, I doubt people would be getting sick as they are. But again, we'll wait to see that. But the soil samples from San Jose did show that there were, as you said, toxins.
The question is, how far did they distribute, right? And what are we going to find, right? It's our hope that when these results come out, I got to tell you honestly, my hope is it's negative, and then we look for the real reason why this is happening. But I'm assuming they're going to be positive. I don't know where they're going to be. I don't know if they're going to be down the street from where my parents live in Aptos. I don't know if they're going to be on my front deck. I don't know if they're going to be in Hollister, 35 miles from here, up in Pescadero, halfway, a third of the way to San Francisco. I don't know where we're going to find it because we test in all those places. It would be best if they're negative, but if they're positive, at least, and the way this works, as I understand it, is that it could be in one spot and 5 miles away or a mile away it's not there, because there might be a box canyon, or there might be the wind came right to that area and it just worked its way. We don't know. So, but we're going to find out, and without the information, we can't know what's happened. And so, what I wanted to say is just 3 things. First off, when this happened, my number one thing that I need to do was protect my family. We're lucky. We have the resources. We were able to leave. We're currently living in an Airbnb over on the Monterey Peninsula because we can, and we don't want to be here. My wife's not going to let me come home without taking a shower first now that we're out here, because the wind's blowing, this stuff, if it's in the environment, is here. So we did that. But the tragedy is that most people here can't do that. tonight we're going to be speaking, you'll be there, to the Hispanic community for the first time, trying to give them some information. We're 2.5 weeks into this. Maybe somebody's talked to these folks, but that leads to the second great tragedy about this, which is that for whatever reason, the authorities in general, with a couple of exceptions, have been absent. And I know there's disorganization. I know there wasn't a good plan in place, as was supposed to be with the company, as I understand it. I know that, there's a lot of implications if we find this has spread wide through this area. I get it. But there are people who are really in trouble here. And it's a fire hose of information going on in the world right now. And with the fire in LA and everything in DC and all this stuff, there have been sources like yours. There have been some papers. The New York Times had a person on site this last week, but it hasn't been covered. There's just so much going on in the world. And so this is a real major disaster. And that's the third tragedy. Most of the people don't know that. And in this community, people don't know that. I talked to a neighbor who's a college professor, and I said, do you know? And he said, oh, the fire went out they had the fire out by Sunday. It's done. Yeah. I talked to a doctor. He said, oh, yeah, we all had a cold the week after. I said, dude, that's not a cold, because he doesn't, he's a smart guy. There's been, near as I could tell, no guidance from the health authorities. There has not been leadership from the state. I know they're concerned about how this can impact the state's commitment to battery storage. Batteries are a great solution, except if they're gonna burn down. And not wanting to deal with questions about that policy.
You can hear the sea otters chirping.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, the sea lions. Sea lions. But not knowing necessarily what to do about this crisis doesn't mean you must be on the ground. Yeah, the sea lions. They got to come in and be on the ground to help this community, and that hasn't happened.
So, that brings me to the next thing. The lack of transparency is deeply problematic because it does allow for misinformation or disinformation to get into the pipeline, which actually doesn't help anybody. One thing I wanted to point out is that the technology at this particular storage facility isn't up to date. So it's an older facility. It's one of the largest, or not the largest, in the world.
It was the largest in the world until it burned. It was the largest in the world until it burned.
Okay, so there are things that they could do safety-wise in order to bring that up to speed as to where it should be. So, and that wasn't done. So I don't think anybody's giving you necessarily pushback or giving the state pushback necessarily on we don't want to have, green technology. I think pretty much everybody we've talked to here does want the green technology. They know it's long-term better for the environment and everything else. But that doesn't mean we should ignore safety protocols, because lithium is highly volatile, it's very reactive, and we are, as you can see, surrounded by water here. So the idea that water could get into that facility, and also it's raining right now, which is, I don't know if you can see some of the rain on the lens here. So I could see why those things would be, something that need to be taken care of. So are there any plans going forward for them to put in new safety protocols, etc.?
Right. If there are, we haven't heard.
Okay.
The company is not talking. We know that they've engaged, from reporting that I've read and others have read, they've engaged a PR firm that works from a playbook to help large corporations with environmental exposures and problems to address how to manage that with the public, with authorities. They've been engaged in this effort to
FTI Consulting?
FTI Consulting, yeah. They're a big corporation, of course. Vistra last year, according to published reports, was the largest polluter in the United States, individual utility polluter in the United States.
Wow.
But they run a massive amount of power in a variety of ways, so it kind of goes with the territory. But they have a huge amount. They're a Texas company with a $40 billion company, from what I've read. And, this is a $1 billion plant. They're trying, obviously, to protect their investment, but they're not communicating, and that's not a good way to be dealing with this community. And for any authorities that are listening, I'm sorry about that. They need to get involved and start helping this community understand better what's going on. The fact that we have to do it on our own is pretty appalling, right? So the people here want green power, but not if it does this.
Right. And it's not mutually exclusive, right? There is a way to handle both things. You know, I do think some of the problems we're facing right now is there's a total gutting of our federal government underway. Obviously, that's affecting everything in the pipeline. I'm not sure what you do about that. But the flip side of that is also the news cycle has been so robust and so insane the last 2 weeks that so many important stories are getting buried, which is why we're here reporting on this. We're going to show you some water samples. Also, if you pan down here, you can see there's some sea lions down here, sunbathing in what little sun we have, but you could hear them. Go ahead.
To your point, Tina, about the rain. So water actually can cause these to catch on fire. And when they catch on fire, you can't put them out.
No. How can you?
Real quick,
like
here's what's here that burned. There's a huge building that's a football field or two long. It's something like 40 or 50 feet high. That building was packed in 2020 and 2021 with batteries.
Yeah.
They were put very close together. There's now tech that use a different chemistry in the batteries that are being used. These batteries are LG batteries. Now they're different batteries and different manufacturers and different chemistry, and those batteries are now typically being placed in basically big tractor trailers with no wheels on them, set on cement, so that if they did burn, it'd only burn a very limited number of batteries. So that seems to be the approach now. There have been changes and upgrades.
And does the cement prevent leaching?
I don't know what that does. All I know is that that's the configuration. I've seen photos. But the question remains, this plant's only 4 years old. Why was there no effort to say, well, we've got new stuff because we need new stuff because this is old stuff, and the old stuff isn't reliable, perhaps implicitly understood. Why wasn't anything done to get this company, with its billions of dollars, to somehow prevent this from happening when the tech clearly moved to a different place, and yet this building was packed? Now, here there's another facility that's run by PG&E and Tesla, is my understanding, and they've done it the new way. Okay. But we had this thing here that nobody really knew about, and the company, from what we can tell, did not provide adequate preparation to the authorities, to the fire department, to the medical department, and these were requirements. And I haven't seen any evidence that they provided that. In fact, what I understand is that their worst case scenario that was presented to the county authorities was a single battery catching on fire. That was the worst case scenario, instead of 80% of 300 megawatts going up in the air. One estimate has 5,000 tons of toxins.
That's crazy. And, you know, I remember reading one of the initial reports that basically the fire department showed up and was like...
Went in, came back out 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
You can't put it out.
You can't put it out. It's impossible. Their normal traditional methods of putting out fires is obviously water. Yeah. And I'm sure that there exists something somewhere that would put that fire out, but they just don't have it here.
Well, last night, Tina, there was a threat of rain coming in, right? And all of a sudden there was panic all over Facebook with people saying, is it on fire again? And because there was some, Matt was just up the road here having dinner. There was something that came in, a fire engine or an ambulance or something. Matt helped us understand what was going on. But for 15, 20 minutes, some people still think there might have been a fire because there's no information. Now, in all fairness, the fire department did send out an alert, an emergency alert about 3-4 nights ago saying with the threat of rain, there could potentially be a resurgence in the fire. So that's about all we've heard. And then nothing last night, and people were speculating, and there was no way to know for sure whether or not that the fire reignited.
So it's raining now. The good news is I don't see any flames or smoke, but that could change as we're standing here.
Hard, but it could. There's weather coming in.
I want to bring Matthew into the conversation. So Matthew, you are a hobby photographer. You showed me some of your great shots earlier today. You've been out here photographing wildlife, beautiful landscape around here. But you also have been involved in collecting samples and going into areas where others have not been willing to go and grabbing samples from those areas. Talk us a little bit through about the work you're doing in this.
Well, you know, my thing is primarily the wildlife and just
make sure you hold it up.
Observing the wildlife
Okay.
and trying to make sure that we can observe any decline that might be happening. However, I'm not a biologist, so I'm not entirely familiar with migration patterns and all that. My main thing is just to be in nature, observe. I got it. It's okay. And basically where this came from, I had been tracking 2 bobcats, and I tracked them directly to a pond where they were obviously drinking. I also found salamanders, a protected species, within a foot of the water. I've got videos on that and videos of tracking, and this is a sample of that water. It had a iridescent sheen on top as if it had some sort of chemicals or oils, pesticides, whatever it might be. We'll find out. But you know, the danger involved here, like Brian was saying with the hydrofluorine, it's you know, the EPA came out and they may have tested it, but at what level did they test it? Because it's lighter than air. Did they fly a drone up 1,200 feet and test the air during the fire? Because the hydrofluorine burns up within the first day or two.
Oh, it does. Okay.
So it's not, you know, that's an initial release. And if anybody can just hop online and study it and find out that oftentimes they've observed an aerosol with that HF. Okay. Now, we have a marine layer because this is a coastal valley. Right. That marine layer goes down the valley. I'm not going to get too specific there because I don't want to panic anybody, but when you have these particulates of HF mixing with the particulates of H2O that's in the atmosphere, that's going to get carried out and it's going to come down with condensation and dew. You know, so it's not a matter of just testing the immediate vicinity.
It's everything.
And then we have the marine layer that recedes right around 9 to 10 o'clock in the morning. So it's kind of a double whammy for the people that live right off the other side of the Elkhorn Slough Reserve, you know, and the reserve itself. So my main thing is just to observe the wildlife, you know, see if there is a decline, what's missing, you know, what's going on. And I'm seeing a lack of insects. There haven't been any pelicans since the fire, and I was actually told that by a local employee. I already noticed that because that's one of the most common birds that I'm capturing.
You feel like maybe they're avoiding the area? They have some intuitive...
you know, it could be migration. It could be avoidance. They might be smarter. You know, it's just... They're definitely more intelligent. Yeah. I mean, I know where they go to rest during the day, and then I know what times they come to the harbor and race up and down the harbor and what time they go out to feed. So when I observe, I'm not just sitting around one spot saying, hey, I don't see a pelican, you know. I'll be doing 12 miles in the reserve, and I'll check every single spot that they should be in, where I have photos and videos of thousands of them, and they're not there. But there is definitely a decline in other species, but there's still other species there. So it's just really confusing. Yeah, and we have an ever-changing weather thing that goes on here where it could be freezing like it is right now and windy, but in an hour it could be sunny and hot. You know, it's like anywhere else, dressing in layers and peeling it off during the day. But, you know, looking at the patterns of everything, we've had reports of people losing bees on 156.
Yeah, I saw that report. Do you know anything about that? Could you talk about that?
I've requested more information from other beekeepers, and nobody's really saying much. I haven't heard anything from veterinarians. That would definitely be something worth.
So hang on, let me talk about that for a second. So for folks that don't know, the beekeepers up here this would be catastrophic. We have been having a loss of the bee population just naturally with just environmental degradation in the area. So they have been keeping bees for the farmland because without the bees, you don't have pollination, you don't have crops. So losing any part of this bee population would be absolutely devastating for this area.
Yeah, the ecosystem, I mean, if you don't have that pollination, you don't have, I mean, no pollination means no insects, means no food for the birds, means no more food for more insects, and it just kind of snowballs.
Yeah.
A declining snowball.
Yeah.
You know.
So Brian has to go here in a second. I wanted to talk. I got you. I want to talk with you about FTI Consulting though first. We touched on this a little bit, but we didn't get into nuts and bolts of this. So FTI Consulting is a corporation that has they're a consulting group that people bring in to do PR, spin doctor work, things of this nature. Environmental crisis management. Messaging, yeah. So propaganda, if you will. They have a lot of fossil fuel clients. That is their sort of area of expertise. So FTI Consulting came in. They set up this sort of phony looking website that was quote unquote designed to put out information, but it was really a PR website designed to make Vistra look okay and to, sort of assuage people's fears without really giving any transparent or honest information. So do you tell us a little bit about what you've discovered about FTI Consulting in your activism?
I just have to let you know, I don't know a lot about it.
Okay.
All I can say is that this is the world we live in. When a big corporation has a big problem, they're going to engage a firm like this to try and manage the fallout, both figuratively and literally, right? So, the community is very concerned that they're monitoring what people are writing and saying. There's a lot of fear, frankly, in the community about that possibility. Something I try to do during this is to have a human being attached to what we're trying to do. My colleagues are working as hard or harder than I am, but somebody's got to be a person, not just info at. Somebody has to be present to show that they're real people trying to understand what's going on and find solutions and get people engaged. And right now I'm playing that role. I don't want to, because on the other side is this huge corporation with all this money that's saying nothing. And I believe that as a community, if we're going to be at the table when the decisions made about what to do with this plant, we need to come together. And all of our activities, the 6 of us with a couple of folks helping us, are designed to try and, number one, make sure, and we call ourselves Never Again Moss Landing, and we have a website that's still being populated, neveragainmosslanding.org. We're not a 501c3, we're not an LLC, we're just people. But what we're trying to do is 2 things. Number one, and this is in our mission statement, to make sure that this never happens again. That's why it's Never Again Moss Landing. Not just here, anywhere. There are reports come in. There was a big fire in Melbourne, Australia, a week and a half ago. There have been smaller fires all over the country. We're not opposed to the tech, but the tech can't burn. And if it's going to burn, it can't continue. So we want to make sure this never happens again. And before this reopens, this community, number 2, has to be involved, directly involved in that decision. So we need to make sure this doesn't happen here or anywhere. And if they can't assure this community that it's not going to happen, because it's happened 3 times, with the last being catastrophic, then this should not reopen. Period. End of story. But if these people show this community that they're willing to take the steps necessary, and the way I describe it is nuclear facility level protocols, because in 60 plus years there's been 1 nuclear accident in this country. Regardless of what you think about nuclear power, there's been 1 accident. Here we've had 3 in 3 years. So whatever the protocols are, they're inadequate. And this community has to have a say in what those protocols are, and they need to be accountable to what those protocols are, which I don't think they were the first time around. And at the end of the day, that needs to stop this from happening. Otherwise, the tech is broken. That's what we need help with, and we need to make sure it's done not just here, but everywhere. So that's our goal. Thanks for asking.
No, yes, thank you, Brian. So we'll see you later on tonight at the community forum that we'll be at.
At least 1 or 2 of my colleagues will be presenting, and I will be there to answer any questions also.
We will be live streaming from that later, folks, so make sure you tune in for that. Matthew, I wanted to ask you, so have you had any of your family members experience any illness in the last week or so that you think might be related to?
Just me. No.
What were your symptoms?
Well, basically, I was out editing photography from about 5:30 in the morning till about 10:30 in the morning. I like to do it outside, get fresh air.
Well, I mean, it's beautiful here.
Yeah, and I had the metallic taste and smell and everything, and it was pretty bad.
Still smell
But
metallic in the air. Listen, you can still smell it a little bit here. I can definitely sense it.
But you know, living near the highway, I figured maybe it was just a car fire, you know, and it would go away. And I'm getting pretty deep into editing my photography, so I wasn't paying much attention until I was getting dizzy and just didn't have any energy at all. And then I was thinking, okay, that's kind of strange. So I just went inside and sat down, and then I passed out.
Yikes.
For 14 hours, actually, which, you know, for me.
And how far do you live from this actual site?
I think it's 8.2 miles. I live in Salinas. But as the crow flies, you know.
Yeah. So a lot of the wind went towards Salinas, right?
Yeah, at that time of the day, you have the marine layer, and that's it's a flow coming in from the ocean, and then you get a double whammy because that marine layer recedes as soon as the sun heats the land. Everything goes to an offshore flow and goes right back out into the bay. So what came in comes back out, drops on you more.
Yeah, I can see that.
But, you know, it's hard to say whether it was a gas or whether it was metallic particles in the air or what. You know, you can't.
No, that's why we need more transparency, right? So, you know, I lived down in Los Angeles and was close to the fires. We had Palisades and the Eaton fires down there. I covered the Eaton fire. But one of the things that our local government was talking about was that the lithium batteries that burnt up in like the Tesla vehicles and the other EV vehicles were contributing a lot of toxic chemicals to the fire cloud. So it wasn't just that, and they brought that up specifically. So it's not just the one thing that the EPA tested for that's toxic in these batteries. Like Brian was saying, there's a lot of heavy metals and a lot of other things involved that could potentially be problematic. So when they don't talk about it, it just leaves people to go like, what's the worst case scenario?
Yeah, see, the HF has an immediate effect on anybody that it touches. It gets into your lungs, it's going to burn your lungs, it'll burn the back of your throat. So you have a lot of people that are complaining about having throat problems. You can hear mine right now. That's because I spent several hours in the reserve yesterday hunting this down. But you know, yeah, you have your nickel, you've got your cobalt, and you've got your manganese. Those are the ones that are going to seep into the ground and eventually make it into the water table. So that's the stuff that you can test for right now. You're not going to be able to find anything with HF because that's a gas. You know, you're not looking at particles at that point.
No, it's too late, yeah.
So in order to really test for that, they needed to have some sort of sensors already set up so that they knew, yes, there was an HF release during the fire. No, not, well, I couldn't attest to that.
Okay.
They might.
If they do, they haven't said anything about having air quality sensors around the plant?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. I mean, that's going to be something they're going to want to hush anyway because that's going to freak people out. But you do have a lot of people on the forums that are showing burns consistent with HF. You know, manganese doesn't burn. Cobalt's not going to burn you, you know.
So that's a bad sign.
Yeah, that's definitely a bad sign. But at the same time, I'm not hearing anything from people that have cattle or horses saying that they have any issues. And the vets have not come out to say anything. Okay, so it's really hard because you have to weed through a lot of misinformation. People, they get freaked out when they hear about stuff like this, and they're not doing their research. And then other people can come in and act like they know things and talk about it and freak people out even more. Like Brian was saying, I was eating down the street at a restaurant last night when I saw the fire truck pull up. And you know, my initial thing was just to ask, does anybody know why a fire truck just pulled up to the plant? It wasn't to freak anybody out. No, and So we really have to keep in mind that people are going to see things. They're going to take
on
things.
Edge. People are on edge.
Yeah. So maybe I shouldn't have even asked, But so I woke up this morning and there was like 30 responses to people waiting for an update, and I'm like, oh geez, I was on the reserve all day. I'm completely toast, fatigued. So I just went home and went to sleep. Right. But it was kind of interesting to wake up and see a bunch of people had panicked because of that. And a couple people actually posted call logs.
Oh, yeah, that's public information.
Somebody said that their husband told them, they lived in Watsonville, their husband told them that there was a fire. And I'm just like, well, we don't have any record of that. They didn't send ladder trucks. It was a paramedic truck, so I highly doubt it was a fire.
Okay.
However, at the same time, their plan is let it burn.
Let it burn.
So
because they have no way to put it out. That's the thing, right? There's literally, when you have a fire that started with water, how do you put that fire out? So
exactly,
it makes sense that people are on edge.
Yeah, but in designing something like this, you have to have a plan and you have to have a contingency for that plan. Let it burn is not a plan.
Let it burn is not a plan. They have to come up with a safety protocol.
I hear a lot of people seem to be blaming the county or the fire department, and that's not who you blame, because
I wouldn't blame the fire department. How are they?
They have to protect
Vistra
themselves.
Should have had something here that the fire department could utilize to put out a fire if it was going to happen. Vistra is well aware that lithium is reactive to water. They know that. That's their job, right? So it seems to me that there should have been some safety protocol measure in place where if a fire did break out, they had the means to deal with that, because clearly the county fire department has no protocol for putting out lithium battery fires. Why would they?
Exactly. I mean, you can't, you don't want to fault the fire department for something that they shouldn't even be expected to have to deal with. Something like this needs to have their own people to take care of it, and it should have had containment.
Matthew, that costs money. They don't want to spend the money on the safety protocols. They'd rather take the profits. I feel like that's just sort of where we are at.
Exactly. They would rather give us $750.
Right. All right. I want to clarify for folks that don't know about that 1 second. So Vistra, the company who is responsible for the plant, decided that they were going to give out $750 gift cards to anybody that had to be evacuated. But I want to say this. If you were evacuated, that $750 isn't going to go far. When we were trying to book hotel rooms to come up here to cover this, the rates were insane. I'm talking like $350 a night for a room. So not going to last very long. We ended up staying further out just because it was, the only place we could stay affordable.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a family with 3 kids,
yeah, what are you gonna
that's going to be pretty expensive. You're eating out, you've got $5 a gallon for gas. Yeah. And good luck finding a place here, because there is a lot of tourism.
Right.
And that's kind of fueling some of the stuff. People, businesses don't want to lose money, and we can't blame them for that. There's no emergency fund that's taking care of these businesses.
These are small mom and pops. You have a small mom and pop coffee shop, whatever. They need help too, because if they lose their business, they're not going to be able to pay their bills. People need to realize that most of the folks affected by this stuff aren't large corporations. The large corporations cause the problems because they don't want to spend the money, but then the mom and pop small businesses end up
pay for it.
Yeah, I get that. That makes sense to me, what you're saying. And there's a lot of that here, right? A lot of small mom and pop stores and coffee shops, restaurants, whatnot.
Yeah, most of this area is locals. I actually only know of one store that's not locals here, and
which is very small town California. I love small town California. What is next steps for you then? So are you going to continue to monitor the wildlife, maybe get more samples? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, just observe, and if I see something strange like with this pond, then I'll see if I can get somebody to help me get it tested, and because I don't really have the resources to do much. I get out there because I have a spine injury, and walking is the best thing I can do. And then I'm one of those people where I just feel like I have to be doing something, so I grab a camera and take it with me.
Right.
So hopefully everything turns out, and we don't know how bad it is or how good it is, but we can assume that we're not being told the truth.
That seems that way. Why else would they pay a consulting firm to put up this kind of sort of phony website to detract from the lack of real transparency on what's going on. I get that.
Exactly. And, I wanted to add a few things because I have done a little bit of research on lithium ion, and that's because, in doing my wildlife photography, I have a setup in my vehicle so that I have power to be able to power a laptop to edit, for days on end. I can go camping. So, in particular, I use lithium phosphate batteries, and the reason for that is they have a built-in controller that senses when a cell is going to fail.
Okay.
So if that cell fails, instead of having metal bars connecting each of the cells together, those are solid bars. These use relays in between each cell, so it can lift open that contact, and you don't have this thermal runaway.
Right.
I mean, you can still have it in testing. They've shown that it happens a very small percentage of the time. But, what they've done, what I think they've done, is they've looked at the added weight of the lithium phosphate. That's going to cost more money to ship in here. And if you're looking at 1,000 batteries, that's ridiculous. But, so you're looking at the weight. You're looking at, the fact that it costs more.
Right.
So
it's not worth the safety protocol trade-off, though. That's interesting because I didn't know that about the phosphate. So it sounds to me like we've seen the same thing with the private utilities, right, where the decisions are being made about where they can, cost cut a few pennies. But what you end up with is, like the PG&E fire when that came into Paradise and just absolutely devastated, causing millions of dollars worth of damage. Something small like this could have been prevented if they had just chosen to maybe spend a little bit more money per thing doing a safety thing, and it's just being penny wise and pound foolish, but they don't care because nobody holds them responsible, right?
Exactly. The black and white of this is that they weighed this cost versus the value of these lives, whether it be the wildlife or the people in the area. Right. So, it's a corporation. They don't.
So sad. So sad. So are you going to be tonight at the, I feel like I'm being interviewed by my guests now. It's kind of fun. Are you going to be at the community forum tonight?
I could. I didn't even know about it.
Oh, all right. Well, you should definitely be there. What are your parting thoughts on all of this, if you have any more?
Really, I just think it's ridiculous. I mean, if you look at the location, anybody can hop on Google Earth, set the terrain. You're going to see that this is a valley. Yeah. And, to put something like this, even if there wasn't a Monterey Bay Preserve on one side and a Elkhorn Slough Reserve, an ecological wildlife reserve on the other side,
right,
you still have a valley that has the wind coming in and pushing down it. That air does not have any place to go.
It has no place to go.
It does spill over and it goes into San Benito, so you do end up with people in Hollister, San Juan Bautista complaining of symptoms.
Which is a little bit more east of where we are.
It's actually a little bit north. It's over the North Ridge that you can see if you're in Salinas.
Okay, right on. All right, I'm going to take the mic back here. That was fun. I just got interviewed by my guest. No, thank you, Matthew, for joining us. Also want to mention that we don't take corporate money here at Status Coup. We are funded by membership. So if you can afford to join as a Status Coup member, it's $5 a month. It pays for our trips to do on-the-ground reporting, like here this week at Moss Landing. Obviously, we covered the UAW strikes, North Carolina with FEMA, Atlanta, Cop City. I mean, the list goes on and on. We specialize in going out into the field and working on stories that are not getting enough attention. So thank you for joining us for this live interview and update here in Moss Landing. Again, this is in the Monterey Bay area of central Northern California. There was a large lithium battery storage facility that went up in flames. 100,000 batteries were in there, caused a lot of toxic fumes, and we're not sure what else at this point. So the new testing will be coming out this Friday. This has been independent testing that was done by the residents here, and with the help of an engineer. They sent the samples to Salt Lake City, where they're currently at the lab. We should have those results on Friday. Supervisor Church has been sort of, as far as politics go, on the forefront of trying to get something done here. He compared it to a little mini 3 Mile Island as far as what it looks like for a disaster. So be sure to tune in tonight. We're going to be doing a live from the community forum, which is going to be covering the Latinx communities. So why that's important is inland from here is where all the farmland is, and they have been given very little information on how this is going to affect them. Obviously, if the toxins have leached into the soil, that's going to be very problematic. So we're going to be there later tonight, doing a live there. Thanks for joining us now. 8:30. So it's 8:30 Pacific time. 8:30 Eastern. Okay, so 8:30 Eastern, we will be live again at the forum. So make sure you guys tune in then. And again, if you can afford to join for $5 a month, I couldn't get that out. We'd appreciate you doing so. Oh, yes. And John Farino, who's behind the camera, says, subscribe so you get a notification when we go live. He's right. Any party thoughts?
No, it's been cold.
All right. Thanks, guys, for joining us, and we will see you later on this evening.